Warning! Kinda Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
California's rugged and scenic northwestern corner is the beginning of the great Pacific Northwest. A region of untamed and primitive beauty.
And the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department has now joined efforts with the Arcata Police.
Growers living off the grid. Humboldt County also has the highest rate of missing person cases in the state. Where 60% of marijuana is grown in the United States.
There's a lot of evil here. A lot of evil.
This is Kinda Murdery, and you're entering the Emerald Triangle. Wow, that was nuts. Hey everybody, welcome to Kinda Murdery. I'm your host, Zevon Odelberg. Thank you for deciding to be here. When we stepped carefully through the tragic tale of Frida Beckley alongside Darren Marlar from Weird Darkness podcast, I shared with you my assessment that Mendocino County stands out as home to the Emerald Triangle's most depraved and fantastical true crime stories. Today is further proof of that truth, as we find ourselves once again in Mendocino. And Mendocino once again proves to be the nexus of both the bizarre and far-reaching. I imagine you're familiar with the butterfly effect. No, not the 2004 thriller starring Ashton Kutcher and Amy Smart, although if you've seen the movie it demonstrates my point, and you can feel free to ignore my next few sentences. I'm talking about chaos theory. The idea that if a butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazonian rainforest, it can change the weather half a world away. Meaning that everything that happens in this moment is an accumulation of everything that's come before it. This is also the central thesis to Tolstoy's War and Peace. There, I've saved you 1,500 pages of reading. Feel free to spend your new free time listening to Kinda Murdery. Kidding, read War and Peace, it's awesome. But so why the heck am I off on a tangent about butterflies and chaos theory and Russian literature? Three things that on the surface seem entirely unconnected. Well, that is the essence of chaos theory. Seemingly unconnected events are in fact a veritable Gordian knot of interconnectivity. And what does all this have to do with Mendocino County? The opaque will become clearer as we unravel today's mystery, although, with all the chaos that abounds throughout this story, I can in good conscience promise little more than translucent murk. Today's magnum opus of awfulness features the murder of a former college basketball star, turned former major program head coach, turned medical lecturer and hospital employee. He's from a famous Dutch family. It also features an admitted serial killer hell-bent on his own innocence despite boasting about 30-plus murders, and equally hell-bent on framing his movie star beautiful femme fatale of a 19-year-old common-law wife, who despite her psychotic husband is also most probably a lesbian. It's a story that touches on advances in criminal detection science, specifically the lie detector. It features confessions recanted and confessions invented to distract from crimes more horrible than murder. And although today's murder was committed in 1959, its far-reaching reverberations continued to 2021 and beyond, managing to intersect with Hollywood star Harrison Ford, a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter for the Miami Herald, and even O.J. Simpson's turn as a fugitive passenger in a Ford white Bronco fleeing for the Mexican border. And where did all this chaos spark? Where and when did the butterfly flap its proverbial wings? Well, it began in Mendocino County, of course, on Monday, August 17, 1959, when former Gonzaga head coach, UC Berkeley Golden Bears center and team captain, Perry Ten Eyck, scion of the Alameda branch of the famed Ten Eyck family, was found face down along the 101 highway outside of Laytonville, California, pistol whipped to an untimely death at the age of 52. It's a lot to cover, but before I get into it, I've got to introduce you to my guest today. It's writer, producer, actor, acting teacher, opera singer, and star of the wildly popular video game and podcast zombie drama, We're Alive, where she is the iconic voice of Pegs. That's right, Elisa Eliot is here, everybody.
Hi, Zevon. It's so good to be here, and thank you for that very kind intro. And I must say, after listening to your intro of this Kinda Murdery tale, I mean, I am hooked already. There are so many details. How is this going to involve Harrison Ford? I mean, I am all ears. I am so excited.
First of all, I'm so happy to hear that because I was getting a little self-conscious that I was probably a bit long-winded there. So I'm glad I hooked you.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, all of those details and how it's going to go from the 1950s all the way to present time. I mean, wow.
Allow me to fanboy for a moment here. I have to say, I love We're Alive. It seems like everybody does.
Oh, thanks.
And second of all the guests that I've had on Kinda Murdery, you geeked my friends out the hardest.
Oh my gosh. That is a huge compliment.
The show's called Kinda Murdery, so I run with a crowd of sort of true crime paranormal folks.
Awesome.
And, they love zombies, of course. Mm-hmm. And they were like, you've got Pegs on your show.
Well, that makes me very happy because I think all the fans of the show will agree to this statement. I'm not making an, outside of the realm statement, but Pegs, the character I play, is a very polarizing character. People either love Pegs or absolutely despise Pegs. There are whole threads on the Facebook fan, pages about how they would have gotten rid of Pegs, like right away, killed her off immediately.
Come on, you gotta love Pegs.
Of course.
Give me a break.
I mean, not everybody can have the perfect skills to survive in a zombie apocalypse. That just wouldn't be realistic.
It just also wouldn't be that interesting of a story. I mean, if everybody was like The Rock, Terminator robot, that's not as compelling, right? So tell me, for the people that hate Pegs, what's the number one complaint you've heard the most? And then on the flip side, for the people who love Pegs, why do they love her?
So I think the reason people do not like Pegs is because she seems to have very few skills that someone who would survive this long in a zombie apocalypse would have. She's a florist. She's anti-gun. She won't shoot a gun. And, unless, she absolutely has to. She makes some vital errors, not to, put out any spoilers for anybody who still wants to go back and listen to the original series. She makes some mistakes. I mean, as any normal person would in, such an environment. But I think that's why people tend to, not like her. Plus, Michael really likes her, and maybe they think that that's not for a very good reason. But I think the reason people do like her is because she has such a great arc in the story. All of this information about her backstory comes to light. It turns out, spoiler alerts, people, she can fly a helicopter. She's a florist, but she's also...
so she's way more of a badass than anybody actually knows.
Yes, but I mean, and I still think people can't get over her initial weakness, so to speak. But then, she has a great arc. And I must say, no spoilers here, but Pegs in We're Alive Descendants, I mean, I like to call it Pegs Gone Wild because it's
I like
so
to call it that
fun.
too now.
I loved Pegs' storyline in this new season that's coming up. So I hope those of you who listen enjoyed as much as I did.
That is awesome. It sounds to me like Peg's character exists in some ways to let the audience know that there's still some greater long-term hope for survival.
I think you're absolutely right. I do. I think you're right.
Right. If a florist and a peacenik is still alive, then maybe we can all make it through, right? I mean, I think you have to have a character like that. Because like you alluded to, if everybody's RoboCop, it's just not that interesting.
No, it's not that interesting. And, there have to be people worth fighting for that aren't your typical military or, apocalyptic survivor survivalist type people.
Right, people that are capable of nurturing the future of humanity when they finally overcome the zombie apocalypse, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I love Pegs. We love Pegs. We love you.
Uh-oh.
And everybody, The Descendants premiered this April 5th, so just a few days ago. So please go to your favorite podcatcher and listen to it, subscribe to it if you haven't already, and you probably have. It's a wonderful show. Engage with it, leave a review, reach out to Elisa on social media, tell her how great she is because she is. But check out We're Alive Descendants. All right, shall we jump into our Kinda Murdery story here?
Oh, yes, please. I can't wait.
You know, actually, before we do, I do have another We're Alive question for you because I just got to know. We're Alive being a zombie apocalypse story is almost by definition, it surpasses Kinda Murdery and goes straight to super duper murdery.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't get much more murdery than eating human brains, right? But
True.
right. So that being said, is there a particular scene from We're Alive that sticks in your head as sort of being the murderiest, or were you just kind of, you did it and then you went, oh my God, that was rough? Can you share that with us?
Well, sure. Again, spoiler alerts here. But
okay.
Pegs has a scene in which she is confronted with her worst fear, which isn't actually zombies, but is firing a weapon, a firearm. And in order to save herself and her loved one, she has to shoot somebody. And that scene was just so powerful to listen to and, of course, to be the actor behind it because of the huge amount of backstory leading up to this moment and the backstory of all the characters that, you know, come to a culminative moment when they all are in the stairwell and about to kill each other, and she does kill someone. And that moment, very, very murdery moment, even though it doesn't involve zombies, was the most, the darkest moment, I think, for Pegs in the series.
It sounds like in order to survive, she realized that she had to sacrifice something that she saw as fundamental to who she is.
Yes.
Maybe?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it shakes her to the core. Even though she did the right thing, I think it takes her a while to recover from that. And as you mentioned, tying it back into your story, the butterfly effect qualities of this decision she makes reverberates through the entire rest of the seasons.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. And I think that it also seems to speak to what we were talking about just a moment ago about why you need a character like Pegs. In a land of murder, for Pegs, murder is still murder. She is the moral compass of the show, right? Yeah,
I think so. When killing becomes so commonplace, you do need someone to bring you back down to reality and say, look, we really shouldn't probably be murdering other humans. I don't know if she feels that way about zombies, as they're not truly human anymore. I think we established that pretty early on in the series, but there are a lot of bad people in We're Alive, along with bad creatures. So she sort of sets that up,
right,
as you mentioned.
So there you go, folks. Pegs is humanity's hope for survival. So if you don't like Pegs, that's pretty dark, bro. You should turn that inward and look at yourself. That's what I have to say about that.
Yeah. Listen to Zevon.
All right. Shall we jump back into our story?
Oh,
here?
yes.
Like every murder story, today's begins with a fundamental question that must be answered in order to grab our ball of string lifeline and wind our way safely through the labyrinth, finding a way to avoid being eaten by the Minotaur of murder. And so we begin with the logical first question, the natural entrance to the maze. We begin with the victim and we ask, who was Perry Ten Eyck? Perry Ten Eyck was born on September 20th, 1907, into the East Bay Alameda branch of the legendary Dutch-American family, the Ten Eycks. That's TEN-EYCKES.
Wow, that's a last name.
It sure is. Well, the Dutch do like their last names.
Oh, yes.
That's for sure. So what makes the Ten Eycks legendary? Well, I'm going to leave that to your nimble Google fingers, because when telling a story with this many butterfly wing flaps, I could only afford so many tangents.
Right.
Here we go. Perry Van Eyck. Born in 1907, he'd go on to become the captain of the Cal Golden Bears men's basketball team. Captain, forward, and center in the 1920s under head coach Nibs Price. As a college basketball player, Perry Van Eyck was a tremendous winner. Indeed, although the stats don't exist in Basketball Reference because it was too long ago. If you do the math for a man born in 1907, Van Eyck captained the team for the 1925-1926 and 26-27 seasons, when the Golden Bears went undefeated for 2 straight years. 14-0 and 17-0 for a combined record of 31-0.
Wow.
Yeah. After his illustrious playing career, at the very young age of 25, Perry would become the head coach of Gonzaga University for a single, ill-fated season from 1932 to 1933, when the Gonzaga Bulldogs would go 4-15, posting a .211 winning percentage, the lowest in school history, and a far cry from their number 1 rank going into this year's NCAA tournament.
Ooh.
Indeed, it seems that after his playing days at Berkeley, Perry had trouble winning at anything ever again.
Uh-oh. This does not bode well for him. He peaked in high school, or college, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, what's wrong with that?
Nothing.
I know. Okay, so in 1959, 26 years after his ill-fated stint at Gonzaga, and shortly before his murder, the bricks just kept clanking for Perry. He was estranged from his wife, Peggy, living in Whittier, renting a room in the home of Mr. and Mrs. Cecil Hartman, and working at a hospital. He drove a beat-up jalopy built in 1947, and he really missed his ex-wife.
Whoa, that's a big fall from grace from basketball star to driving a jalopy.
Living in an elderly married couple's rented room.
Oh, gosh.
Divorced in Whittier. And he really misses his wife, who still lives in Alameda, home of his family and glory days. And so, with the help of his landlady and friend, Mrs. Hartman, he invents a very thin pretense upon which to visit his wife, Peggy. Not on purpose, by the way. But
I know.
Her name's
Peg's
Peggy.
pretty close.
Here's the premise. The premise was that Mrs. Hartman was gifting the ex-Mrs. Ten Eyck a watch band, and Perry was going to drive from Whittier to Alameda, 391 miles, about 6, maybe 7 hours with stops today, but probably more like 9 or 10 in a 1947 hoopty.
Yeah.
And he's going to make that drive to deliver Mrs. Hartman's watch band to Peggy.
I mean, just a watch band, not even a whole watch.
And just a watch band that his landlady / neighbor / sort of friend is gifting to his wife, which is to say, I doubt it's 18 karat gold. It's not even a watch band that he bought her. It's the band that he could convince an amicable acquaintance to give away as a device for him to go visit.
As you said, this is a very, very loose excuse to go drive 10 to 12 hours to see his ex-wife.
Yeah. I mean, this is a really sad story.
Yeah.
He went from being the winningest college basketball player at Berkeley to being the worst head coach that a major program ever had, and now he works as a maintenance man in a hospital, driving an old beat-up car, renting a room from an elderly couple, and borrowing Casio bands from his landlady to drive 400 miles to deliver to his wife, ex-wife.
This is very sad. This is very sad for him.
It is, but it's about to get sadder.
Ooh.
I know. I'm sorry. Apologies, but show's called Kinda Murdery. caveat emptor, it is about to get sadder. At some point during his drive north, Perry... It's not Van Eyck. I'm doing that because he's Dutch. I'm like, it's Van Eyck, yeah. Dutch are all Vans. His name... How am I blanking? Oh, Ten Eyck. I'm like, how am I blanking on my main character's name? It really is. It really is. At some point during his drive north, Perry picks up 3 hitchhikers.
Oh, no. That's never good.
No. Good things come in threes, and so do bad things. Police guessed they were looking for 3 assailants when they found 3 different brands of cigarettes surrounding Perry Ten Eyck's body. And then they found those 3 assailants. 22-year-old Roger Hall, 29-year-old Emmett Spencer, and 19-year-old Mary Kathy Hampton. So that night, Monday, August 17th, 1959, Perry Van Eyck was driving north to deliver the watch band to Peggy. Like we said, it's heartbreaking. His ex-wife. And when he is persuaded by the beauty and innocence projected by Mary Kathy Hampton, not so much her companions, who we find out later were career convicts, to pick up the 3 hitchhikers. Again, they were Emmett Spencer, Roger Hall, and Mary Hampton. Now, there were lots of pictures of Hampton in the newspaper between 1959 and 1967, and it's not surprising that there were, because drama loves a beautiful, dangerous woman. 19-year-old Mary Hampton looked like a cross between Katharine Hepburn and Annette Funicello.
Oh.
But before we make too much of her as a femme fatale, let's remember how young she was, in particular, compared to her companions. Still, youth didn't stop her from making short work of Perry Ten Eyck. Perry had barely let the 3 hitchhikers into his car when Hampton took a pistol out of her pocket and cracked Perry on the skull right below the ear.
Wait, she did that?
According to the confession and sworn statement of Emmett Spencer, 29, it was Mary Kathy Hampton who first broke Perry Ten Eyck's skull. She may, and we will arrive here later, have a different version of those events.
Yeah.
As far as we know for now, yes, she was the one to hit him first.
Okay.
And so she bashes him in the skull right below the ear. Emmett Spencer then takes the pistol from Hampton and finishes the skull bashing. Then they steal what little money Ten Eyck has along with his car and the watch band for Peggy. And they dump his body face down along the 101 highway an hour south of the Humboldt County Mendo line near the little town of Lanes Flat by Laytonville. They then apparently smoked standing around his corpse for a while, which I find upsetting.
Very upsetting.
The cops tracked them down because of 3 different brands of cigarettes, which means that all 3 of them stood around the murdered man like they were playing hacky sack and just ripped some heaters for a while. Talk about sociopaths.
Exactly, and they were not smart either. To just
you're right.
leave their bodily and physical... I mean, I guess it was, a long time ago, but they were just leaving their cigarettes with their DNA on them.
Because what are the odds that when you find the 3 seemingly unconnected perpetrators, but then they just each happen to smoke the right brand? I mean, I think you found your killers. So, to your point, pretty dumb.
Yeah.
So, they smoke around his corpse like fucking assholes, pardon my French. And then they left. Now, a few days later, on August 24th, 1959, the body of a man named Dr. John Hunt of Portland, Oregon, is found shot to death in the Idaho desert. Now, I'm sorry, everyone, if you have a little bit of whiplash. I'm sure that sounds like a non sequitur. What the heck does a dead doctor from Oregon found in the desert of Idaho have to do with a washed-up college basketball player found dead in Northern California, hundreds and hundreds of miles apart? Well, you're going to find out, but you're going to find out later.
Ooh, tempting.
I love the classic radio tease. I really do. After the break.
Oh, me too. I am so intrigued.
So they find the body of Dr. John Hunt, and I'll tell you about that in a bit. But here's where it starts to get crazy. Here's where the butterfly effect kicks in. Perry Ten Eyck, murdered in August of 1959. They don't find his killers right away. And then, in March of 1960, George Mark Wagoner from Eureka, California, who had been working as a fry cook in the town of Lane's Flat where Perry was murdered, comes forward and admits to the killing of Ten Eyck, saying he bashed his skull with a pistol butt and then left before he knew how badly Ten Eyck was hurt. So this is really out of left field. We thought we knew who did the killing. What? We thought I was going to tie it into some doctor in Idaho, and now all of a sudden a random fry cook. Yeah, and there's not even I've driven the 101 north and south many times. I've driven by Lane's Flat. I've driven through Laytonville, and Laytonville is literally a one stop sign town. Lane's Flat is a no stop sign town. So I'm surprised there was even a guy working as a cook, but that one guy murdered Perry Ten Eyck.
And he came forward himself? Just admitting this out of the blue?
About 5 months after the murder, he said it was me. I did it. Well,
weird.
Yeah, it is. You're like, what a terrible, unsatisfying story. I was so into the Katharine Hepburn, Annette Funicello thing. There was cigarettes. There was all kinds of great noir stuff. And now it's just some dumpy chicken cook from Lane's Flat. Just completely drove us into a ditch there. Yeah. Well,
no, I did it. I just felt like telling now out of the blue.
Oh,
I don't know why he has a southern accent in my mind.
Gonna say.
Because he's from Northern California, but
yes.
In my head, he definitely sounds like that.
You have some terrible northerner preconceptions about southern people, Elisa.
I guess so.
You're an actress. I was an actor in college, and for anybody who's done improv classes or anything like that, preemptive self-censorship is the death of creativity.
I agree. And I oftentimes do say things that I'm like, why did I say that? But I mean, I guess I said it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will identify with this if you think about it, though, which is how often do we never follow up on our best ideas because we tell ourselves, oh no, that's stupid, or oh no, somebody's already thought of that, or oh no, whatever, and we judge ourselves harshly, we dump the idea in the trash, and we leave it there. And then some months or years later, some big, great idea bursts on the scene, and you think to yourself, I thought of that once, or I thought of something similar to that, but I was like, that's dumb, and I never thought about it again.
Right.
When I kind of realized that, I was like, I never want to do that ever again. Mm-hmm. So now I have my own podcast where I can say what I want.
As you should.
And here I am just blathering away on my soapbox, and everyone's like, wait, tell the damn story. Okay. So what's the deal with George Mark Wagoner? Well, I can tell you that the authorities, specifically Sheriff Reno Bartholomew from Mendocino County, who's a law enforcement officer we've talked about before on this show, he finds his way into some pretty incredible stories because he's the sheriff of Mendo. He feels the same way that Elisa and I, and probably a lot of you listeners did, which is, no, this isn't how the story goes. That doesn't wash. Well, you're right. The sheriff says this guy doesn't know enough specific details about the murder to make him a believable killer. So why then would he confess? Did Mary Cathy Hampton seduce and kidnap his son? Was Roger Hall and Emmett Spencer holding his family hostage? Why would he preemptively confess to a murder that even the police who want to catch the people so bad don't believe he could have possibly committed?
Huh.
Well, the answer is gross. So, warning, gross coming up.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait.
George Mark Wagoner is facing multiple sex crimes with young boys charges.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Not the kind of gross I was hoping for.
I know. Like really deeply spiritually gross.
Yeah, that's gross.
You're listening to Kinda Murdery.
Yeah.
God.
Ew.
Sometimes, and I remind listeners of this because I have to remind myself of this. Sometimes grim humor can be the device we need to process horror. Everybody reacts to things in different ways. Not everybody needs to be proclaiming their moral virtue and burning down others for not being offended or outraged enough. Everybody processes emotion and horror and things in different ways. And for some of us, grim laughter is the way through. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be taken as any disrespect towards victims or anything like that. It's not everybody.
Laughter is the best medicine, even if it's grim laughter.
Yeah. Things land on different people in different ways. And so sometimes I find myself chuckling, but it's not because I actually think any of this is funny. It's because what can you do but laugh or cry? And you don't want to hear me cry. There's lots of snot and it sounds like a horse sneezing mostly.
Yeah.
So he's facing sex crimes charges with children, and he is afraid, as he should be, because this tends to be what prisoners do. Every prisoner has a mother, and every prisoner often, not every, but many prisoners have children. And as sideways as their lives have gone, those women and children are an area they feel protective toward because it's one of the only good things they can remember in their lives. So very often, sex crime criminals and especially pedophiles will be murdered by other prisoners in prison. And that is what George Mark Waggoner is afraid of.
Yes. That now it's all starting to make sense.
So what he says, he makes up the flimsy story and says, I killed him by accident. I hit him in the head with the pistol butt, but I left before I realized how hurt he was. If you drop the sex crime charges, I will plead to manslaughter. So he wants to go into prison as a manslaughterer, not a pedophile. And the sheriff says, no deal.
Good for
no
him.
deal, Glenn Mark. Yeah, you're gross. But they don't have their killers.
Right.
But we know who those killers are, allegedly.
Yes.
So meanwhile, and now I'm going to circle back to Dr. John Hunt of Portland, Oregon. Meanwhile, while Glenn Mark Waggoner is sitting in jail trying to plead to manslaughter instead of pedophilia, Mendo Sheriff Reno Bartholomew gets a message from the sheriff in Idaho who's put out an APB, an all-points bulletin, on the owner of a .351 caliber Webley automatic pistol. That's the gun that killed Dr. John Hunt. Now, Emmett Spencer, 29-year-old of the Hitchhiker Trio, Emmett Spencer had been an inveterate criminal for most of his life. And he grew up in Santa Maria, California, in Mendocino County, which is Reno Bartholomew's jurisdiction. And because he had been in and out of jail his entire life, Sheriff Reno knew that Spencer had that gun.
Oh.
Because, by the way, that's an uncommon gun.
Oh.
I grew up reading cowboy novels in the woods, and I've never heard of a .351 Webley automatic.
Yeah. So if you have a rare gun, probably don't commit crimes with it repeatedly.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Not
Or
smart.
do.
If
If your plan is to murder someone, you should use the rarest, most unique gun possible so we can catch your ass.
And definitely smoke a bunch of cigarettes around the body and then leave the butts there.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Okay, so yeah, Sheriff Reno knows that Emmett Spencer has that particular gun, and he tells the sheriff in Idaho, I think I might have your guy. Meanwhile, while all this is happening, Emmett Spencer is already in prison in Florida facing double death penalty charges for 2 different murders.
How did he get to Florida?
Unrelated to the murder of Perry Ten Eyck, unrelated to the murder of Dr. John Hunt. Emmett Spencer, inveterate criminal that he is and super murdery dude, makes his way to Florida where he murders a Miami newspaper reporter and someone else. And he is convicted and sent to prison facing death penalty charges.
Well, he certainly deserved it.
That's where they find him when they go looking for him, when they find out that his gun killed Dr. John Hunt. They find him already in prison on death row. So he is looking for clemency from the governor on his death penalty charges, which is weird because he is also simultaneously bragging about his exploits as a serial killer, claiming to have killed as many as 30 people throughout Oregon, California, Louisiana, Florida, and Idaho.
Oh my goodness, this guy is not smart.
No, not
and
the
super
bright.
murdery.
Super murdery. I am the baddest ass ever. I've killed 30 people, he says. But also these 2 murders that have me on death row, you should pardon me for those. Then we'll talk about the rest of them.
Yeah, we'll talk about the other ones.
Jackass. So he admits to shooting Dr. Hunt with the Webley. And then he says, and also it's the same pistol that I pistol whipped Perry Ten Eyck to death with. And then he goes on to finger both Roger Hall and Mary Kathy Hampton as his accomplices in both murders.
In both murders?
Yeah, there's no honor among thieves. I mean,
yeah.
Even the authorities, even the FBI, even the sheriffs felt like Emmett Spencer was just trying to stick it to his ex-girlfriend and his accomplice because he was pissed off on death row. But they have to investigate, and it does seem like Hampton and Hall were probably there.
Right.
Hampton and Hall are put into jail in Idaho. By the way, all of these people are from the Emerald Triangle originally.
Of course they are. Where else would they be from?
Of course, right? Spencer grew up in Mendo, in Santa Maria, as I mentioned. Roger Hall was from Eureka, California, and Mary Kathy Hampton was from Crescent City. So all of my homies up in the Emerald Triangle, where I grew up too, those are your towns. You know, don't buy their jerseys. They're assholes.
Yeah.
So they get put in prison in Idaho when he fingers them as accomplices. And then Roger Hall goes on trial for the murder of Dr. Hunt. And the key witness at his trial is Mary Kathy Hampton. And he is found innocent.
Oh.
And released. And so when he is found innocent, if he didn't commit that murder that she was supposed to be a accessory to, she is also released.
Okay.
Yeah. Poor Mary Kathy Hampton, though. Her life is not about to get immediately better.
Oh.
In the meantime, and in interest of, once again, getting his ex, who, by the way, in the newspapers is sometimes described as his common-law wife, sometimes described as being pregnant with his child, and other times neither of those.
Okay, so very sensational news reporting here.
You know, we see a lot of that in the early 1900s, in the late 1800s, in the classic yellow journalism era. I didn't expect to find that level of variance in the narrative in the 60s and approaching the 1970s. That feels much more recent to me.
Yeah.
But I did. So she may or may not have been his common-law wife. She may or may not have been pregnant with his baby. I'm pretty certain, actually, that she could not have been his common-law wife, hopefully, since that takes 7 years and she was only 19. So let us pray that she was not, in fact, his common-law wife.
Yeah, she would have been like 10. That would add another layer of grossness to the story.
Indeed. So, while he's busy confessing to murders, there are 2 people in Louisiana that have been murdered, named Benjamin Yount and Mrs. Fielder. Again, trying to get clemency for being so forthcoming with facing the death penalty on his Florida murders, Emmett Spencer confesses to killing these 2 people in Louisiana.
This guy got around. He's all over the place.
He sure did. And as you said, not that smart. Whoever it is that thinks that if I just keep confessing to murders, they're going to let me out of prison where I'm currently incarcerated as a murderer.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, does he truly believe that it's purely transactional? Like, hey, I might have killed 30 people, but I'll tell you where I hid one of those bodies if you let me out. Oh, God.
He doesn't really understand how the legal system works.
No, he doesn't.
A lot of other things, but...
You know, and a bummer thing for Mary Cathy, he keeps saying she killed people. She keeps basically being found innocent, and yet he's basically harassing her from death row. Every time he says, yeah, she helped me kill this other person, poor girl gets arrested and tried again.
Oh, my gosh. Poor Mary Cathy.
So... he says she helped me kill these people in Louisiana, and she's going on trial, except this time, unlike the murders of Perry Ten Eyck and Dr. John Hunt, this time Mary Cathy herself would be facing the death penalty for these double murders in Louisiana.
Oh.
And again, she's only 19, and this is where her nerve breaks. Afraid of being sentenced to death, she pleads guilty to the 2 murders.
Oh, my gosh.
Or perhaps I should have buried the lead and given it to you the way it would have seemed to the public at the time. She just pleads guilty to the 2 murders.
Oh, right, because they don't necessarily know about all this other stuff.
Right. So she pleads guilty, and she's not sentenced to death because she pleaded, but she is given a double life sentence. So this maybe seems like we're more or less at the end of our story now. Emmett Spencer is on death row. Roger Hall was found innocent of the murder of Dr. Hunt and then not pursued for Perry Ten Eyck since they already had Spencer and they thought he was essentially lying about accomplices anyway. And Mary Cathy is now in prison in Louisiana on a double life sentence. Notably, from a justice standpoint, none of these people are in prison for the murder of Perry Ten Eyck.
Yeah.
And we find this a lot, looking at murder stories and looking at essentially logistical efficacy in the justice system, where they'll say, well, this person is already in prison for a similar amount of time, and sometimes not a similar amount of time, sometimes less time, for another crime. Why spend the time and money to try them for this other horrific crime when they're already incarcerated? And that's what happens in the case of 2 out of 3 of the alleged murderers of Perry Ten Eyck. But this story's not over yet, because I promised you guys a whole bunch of things at the top, didn't I? I promised you, Elisa, personally, a whole bunch of things.
Yes, you did. And I didn't forget.
Yeah. What are some of the things that I promised? I said that this story would connect to advancements in criminal technology, the lie detector test. I said that it would involve a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter. OJ and his white Bronco. I think I promised you that.
Right, you did.
I said that there would be connections to it all the way up to 2021, and I think I name-dropped a famous actor, too.
Harrison Ford,
That's right. So with this crazy, crazy milieu of butterfly effect, how in the world does this story touch on all those things which nobody... If I said to you, okay, here's the game. You got OJ's Bronco, Harrison Ford, a lie detector, and a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, and you have to connect them 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Well, I can do it in 1.
Okay.
And I can do it in 1 through the murder of Perry Ten Eyck. And this is how. Lie detectors were invented prior to the 1960s, but the early to mid-1960s is when they started to be more widely adopted and refined and become more accurate. Notably, Glenn Mark Wagner, who we know lied about being Perry Ten Eyck's murderer for his own disgusting reasons, refused when it was offered to him to take a lie detector test. Well, Emmett Spencer took one, and so did Mary Cathy Hampton. Meanwhile, a reporter named Gene Miller from the Miami Herald in 1966, as lie detector technology is emerging, takes a keen interest in the lie detector, but also in a couple of important death row cases. And those cases are Mary Cathy Hampton she was actually double life sentence, not death row. But the death row case was a Dr. Sam Shepard. Dr. Sam Shepard was sent to death row for murdering his wife, but he had grievous injuries of his own that couldn't really be explained except by him fending off an attacker. And he maintained his innocence vocally throughout. And he essentially said, metaphorically speaking, it wasn't me, it was the one-armed man.
Oh.
That's right. Dr. Sam Shepard, the real-life inspiration for the Harrison Ford movie The Fugitive.
Whoa.
Was discovered as a possible innocent man on death row by Gene Miller from the Miami Herald, who also took a keen interest in Mary Cathy Hampton. And he teamed up with an attorney at the time who was famous for taking impossible doomed cases on a pro bono basis. And that attorney was named F. Lee Bailey. And F. Lee Bailey, alongside Robert Shapiro and Johnny Cochran, famously represented O.J. Simpson in his notorious murder trial. Because F. Lee Bailey was the best attorney in essentially American history at getting a not guilty verdict for an apparently super guilty person, and or getting someone who had already been condemned to die off of death row.
Whoa. So all of these fingers of storyline and murder and crime sort of converge on this Emmett and Mary Cathy.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I personally until now have never heard their names.
Neither had I, and I was really surprised when I found Mary Cathy Hampton's story because, as I mentioned, she was very attractive and the story's insane. So I would have thought, like, I should probably go try to buy the rights or something right now.
I was going to just say, buy the rights to this. This is going to be a television miniseries in no time, as soon as everybody listens to the pod.
Before I can do it, David Fincher will make Gone Girl 2 based on this woman. But so what happens, Gene, like a dog on a bone, will not stop investigating the murder cases involving Mary Cathy Hampton and unrelated but simultaneously incarcerated real-life fugitive Dr. Sam Shepard. And as part of his investigation, he has them both take lie detector tests. The lie detector shows that they're both innocent.
Whoa.
They also have, because his story directly contradicts hers, Emmett Spencer take a lie detector test. The lie detector tech says Spencer has taken these before. He's a lifetime criminal. He's very adept at giving long, meandering, confusing answers that aren't necessarily false, that are more just kind of off topic. So he basically says, I can't prove that he's lying a whole bunch, but I also can't prove that he's telling the truth, and he sure seems to be intentionally confounding my machine.
Maybe we found one thing he's good at.
Yeah. we need him. We need him in Judgment Day, going back to the Terminator references, because he's great at confounding the machines.
Yes. Yeah.
But he claims in his various testimony, among other things, that Mary Cathy Hampton is a lesbian, which of course was salacious in the 60s, if not so much today. And when they question her, they ask her if she is a lesbian. And the takeaway is that everything she says is true, except that when they ask her if she's a lesbian, she says no. And there's an indication from the machine that she probably is, in fact, a lesbian. More of a historically interesting detail than a noteworthy detail otherwise. But, historically interesting is what we're all about on this show.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening? She has served 5 years. The judge commutes her sentence, her double life sentence, to a 10-year sentence. And since she's already served 5 years, she's eligible for parole, and she's out.
Oh.
And as people may or may not know, Dr. Sam Shepard's sentence is overturned, and he is released to go on to live a very sad and alcoholic life, but to inspire a great movie starring Harrison Ford. As for Mary Cathy Hampton, she gets out on parole. The last little coda on this story, though, as far as Mary Cathy Hampton goes, is that the Louisiana sheriff who was in charge of the case that saw her go down for murder, years later is asked, in your long career, Sheriff, what are a couple of cases that stick in your memory? And he immediately latches on to the 2 murders committed by Mary Kathy Hampton. And he says she was absolutely guilty. The story that was portrayed to the public is false. In fact, in court on appeal, F. Lee Bailey essentially admitted to me that he had lost and he was dropping his writ of habeas corpus. But for reasons unbeknownst to me, perhaps because she was young and such a sympathetic figure, the judge chose to commute her sentence to a length that allowed her to get out on parole. There was never actually any kind of definitive determination about her innocence or guilt made. And I am here to tell you, she absolutely murdered those 2 people.
Whoa.
And her attorney as much told me she did. The judge commuted his sentence. That's his right, but she is guilty, guilty, guilty.
Oh my gosh, she is a femme fatale.
Maybe.
She did beat the guy with the butt of her pistol, which by the way, like, they have a gun.
Yeah.
Why are they beating people with it? Why are they not shooting people with it? I mean, these are horrible questions to be asking. You shouldn't be doing anything with a gun. But,
Yeah, they don't want to stain the interior in the 1947 hoopty, I guess.
I guess. Did they steal it?
Yeah, they did. They did actually steal his car. That's probably the best thing they got out of the whole deal.
Yeah, that and the watch strap.
Yeah, I do find it pretty fascinating because every fact of the story and the entire narrative and just common sense, a 19-year-old girl from almost rural Northern California who's hooked up with a couple of older men with big criminal records. Of course she's innocent. Of course she was along for the ride but didn't really know what was happening. And that is the reasoning that the judge gives when he commutes her sentence, that she was young and naive and had this older boyfriend and just wasn't ready for nor really involved in all these horrible, violent things that happened. And I mean, that just makes sense to all of us on a human psychological level. And it just seems like, of course, that's the truth. And yet, in the almost Gone Girl-like twist, if you consider for a moment that this sheriff from Louisiana, who, by the way, Louisiana does not have a long, sordid history of framing pretty white girls. They might frame other people, but not pretty white girls, right? Mm-hmm. And he was like, I stake my badge on her being guilty. I know she was. Her attorney said she was. And if you say to yourself, maybe he's actually telling the truth, well, then you just heard the story, and it's the same story, but all the pieces fall into place with that version of the truth, too.
They do. They really do. Gosh, it is an unsolved. I mean, it's solved in the respect that, like, people went to jail and, you know, there's all this evidence. But is it truly solved if there's still one person out there saying adamantly that, like, this person did it, not this person?
Right.
Wow.
Well, gosh, it just occurred to me, if she was 19 in 1959, Mary Kathy Hampton, hopefully not listening, I guess, would be 80. So if she's still...
Mary Kathy Hampton, if you're listening, feel free to chime in.
Only you know if you're innocent or guilty. Let us know. kindamurdery@gmail.com, on all social media @kindamurdery. I do have to say, though, if I had to pick one, I'm going with innocent young girl carried away by career criminals. I don't actually... I think that the sheriff... It's more likely that the sheriff was pissed off that his most notorious and famous solve got let go.
Yeah.
Than that she was, in fact, the mastermind.
That does sound more reasonable if you're thinking at it from a psychological perspective.
On the flip side, though, maybe that's just my sexist conclusion. Why couldn't a pretty 19-year-old girl be the criminal mastermind behind a bunch of violent, horrific murders?
Yeah, I mean, and if she was common law married to this guy Emmett, who was raising her up to be this murderer from the age of
12, yeah,
12,
God. Oh,
yeah.
No. Oh.
Maybe.
Oh my gosh. Poor everybody. Poor Perry Tanike. Poor Mary Kathy Hampton. Not so much poor Emmett Spencer. Screw Emmett Spencer. I don't like that guy.
Yeah, we don't like him.
How chicken shit is, yeah, I killed him, but so did these other two friends of mine. And he keeps doing it over and over because it keeps working. He's like, I found my one-trick pony, and I'm going to ride it. You know?
What a jerk.
I know. So, let's move on to other topics here. Elisa, could you tell us a kind of murdery story from your own life?
Well, I guess I can. So when you asked me about this, I was thinking, what am I don't know. And then I actually thought of a few.
All right.
But the one that's the most kind of murdery is this. When I was little, I lived in Chicago, downtown, and I went to a school that was right downtown, really close to Lincoln Park.
I thought you were going to say, and that's the story. Do you realize how many murders there are in Chicago? Scene. No, sorry, go ahead.
And scene. That's it. I was in proximity to unknown quantity of murders.
Yeah, so Lincoln Park, you said?
Yeah, so in Lincoln Park, we used to, since it was a city school, we used to go have recess in Lincoln Park. And it was this big, beautiful park, and we used to just run around, and I think it was the gym coaches who were like kind of standing watch, and then they'd blow the whistle, and we'd all go inside. So one of the games as lower schoolers we loved to play was hide and seek, because we had this huge park to play in. And in one of our rousing games...
Sounds like an awesome childhood that would never be allowed today.
Oh, absolutely not. Let these kids run around in a public park by themselves.
Through an inner city public park in Chicago? Yeah, no, not happening. Continue.
Yeah. So we were playing hide and seek, and one of our places that we'd like to go was this sort of little cluster of quite bushy bushes. They were just tall bushes, kind of almost in a clearing, but it was a great place to hide.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my friends and I were, running around, and we go to our hiding spot, and we try to get into the bushes, and then we stop dead in our tracks because there is a guy in there.
A guy. Okay. Yeah. I just got the chills. Yeah.
Lying in these bushes where you can't see from the outside because they're quite dense. Mm-hmm. But there is it's almost as if three bushes were growing together. So there's a little bit of a clearing in the middle, making it perfect for hide and seek, and also for people to be sleeping, I guess.
Or being slowly consumed by bushes, by carnivorous bushes.
Kind of, yes. Okay. So we get startled, and then we're sort of curious, little lower schoolers. So we kind of are watching what's going on in our secret bush hiding spot, and the guy doesn't move at all. And eventually we realize he's either sleeping or dead. So we go tell the coach, and the coach checks it out, and then we see the coach run off, and then we eventually are ushered out, and then on the way back from school, the entire bush area has been police taped off.
So he was definitely dead. He was definitely dead.
So my friend and I had discovered a dead body, a real dead body.
In the park. And how old were you again?
I was in lower school. It had to be sometime between 2nd and 5th grade. And I think I was probably in 3rd or 4th grade at the time.
So did you feel traumatized by this experience? Or did the fact that you found out he was actually dead after make it less traumatic? Or, how are you screwed up now because this happened to you as a young child is what I really want to know.
Great question. I don't remember feeling quite traumatized by it in the moment, but it turns out it was a homeless person who had been sleeping in there, and it gets really cold in Chicago in, the fall and winter at night, and he probably was sick or he
probably
had died
froze to death in the middle.
So it's only kind of murdery because he probably wasn't murdered and just died, but who knows?
But before you found that out, I'm sure your child's mind went on some incredible flights of fancy. That's intense.
It did. And I was really, really, really into spy tech at the time.
Nice.
Do you remember
like Harriet the
those
Spy?
toys that you could buy?
Yeah.
And they had like listening devices and secret notepads where you could like shine a UV light and
Yeah,
fingerprinting
that stuff's
kits
awesome. I had a detective kit as a kid that my best friend and his mom had built and gifted to me for my birthday, and I loved it. I had like graphite for dusting fingerprints, and I mean everything. It was so cool.
Oh, so cool. So I think after it first happened, I was almost felt like a little heroic in a way, like we had discovered this dead body
I get that.
in the park.
Yeah.
And it was a real police case. I mean, you can't get more real than
you
having like,
found a
your
body.
Discovery police taped off. But then when I think about it, I don't think I was actually traumatized by it. But I can picture that little cluster of bushes so vividly. Mm-hmm. And, you know, in a sea of park, like I know exactly where it happened. And if for some reason that little area was still there, I could walk you right to it, even though it's been many, many years.
Right.
So it's seared into my brain.
It made a real
trauma,
impression.
I'm not sure, but affected by it, probably.
Well, they do say that we remember traumatic moments far clearer than joyful moments. So the fact that you have a almost supernatural level of memory clarity about this suggests that you probably were somewhat anyway traumatized by it. Not to pop psychologize you too much, but
oh no, don't worry. You know, both my parents are psychiatrists, and
my God, that sounds like a nightmare.
Every human in my family is in the mental health field.
So are Thanksgivings and Christmases just like even worse than for the rest of us, or does everybody like, fuck it, I'm not working right now, you deal with your own problems?
Basically the latter, but there are times at which it gets a little, analytical in our family.
Gross.
Yeah. And it's also probably why I find this stuff so fascinating. The psyche behind all of these people and what drives them to commit these crimes is I just find it fascinating, horrible, yet fascinating.
I agree. It's so compelling because the human stakes are so high. There's so much leverage in all these situations. And yet all of the decisions that are made when you're not a psycho killer, you're like, I do not understand the connections that were required to cause this domino effect of actions to occur. And because I do not understand, I really, really want to.
Exactly. Why does Emmett kill all these people, then try to get off, then brag about it?
Right.
Like, how does any of that make sense?
It doesn't. Man, I'm just thinking about the psychiatrist family. I mean, when someone's upset, the last thing that they would ever want is to be told, well, honey, I know you're upset, but I also know why you're upset. Now, please let me tell you why you have these feelings.
Yes. Luckily, my parents were not like that at all. But I can imagine, what it would feel like to be in that position. I think they knew better than to say that to me, a very opinionated young sprite.
It's funny because I'm obviously not a psychiatrist, but I feel like I probably do that to my daughter sometimes. Because I feel like we're very similar in terms of our emotional programming, which I think she would admit as well. So a lot of times I do often think that I know why she's feeling a certain way because I feel like I feel the same way for the same reason. But then, of course, that sort of arrogance causes me to also get it wrong fairly regularly, which I'm sure is super obnoxious.
As parents, we can do no right sometimes.
Yeah.
If we're too connected to our children's emotions, then we're invasive. And if we're not connected enough, we're not doing enough. It's,
Right. I guess all we can really do is hope to make them never question the fact that we care deeply for them.
True. Very true. And, our goal as parents is to create adults out of these children that don't end up on Kinda Murdery.
Yeah, exactly.
As the tales that you're telling.
Yeah.
We don't want, they could be guests.
Yeah,
just not in the story.
Yeah, exactly. Our goal is to not raise Emmett Spencer, Roger Hall, and Mary Kathy Hampton.
Absolutely.
Also, our goal should be not to give the abbreviated version of Catherine as a middle name to a poor girl named Mary.
Oh my gosh.
Mary Kathy. Like, I've been thinking about that this whole story. It's been like bothering me that her name's Mary Kathy. Any Mary Kathys out there? I'm sorry. Don't take it personally, but yeah, I don't know. Okay, I'm off the rails. Elisa, this has been super fun. Thank you so much for being here. Everybody remember, this is Pegs from We're Alive Descendants here. The show just dropped on April 5th. This is being recorded on April 4th. I mean, I cannot tell you the level of tingling excitement and anticipation I have, and you should feel the same way if you haven't listened to the latest chapter of We're Alive. That's We're Alive Descendants. Go out, subscribe, review, engage. It's wonderful stories. Elisa, you're a wonderful person, an amazing guest. This has been so much fun. Thank you for being here.
Oh, Zevon, thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun to listen to you tell these incredible stories in such an eloquent and interesting way, as you always do.
Aww.
And it's been fun to catch up. And I, hope we do it more often.
Yeah, me too. And by the way, speaking of storytelling, I loved your "I found a dead body in the park" story. My God, that actually happens to people, and wow, I'm a little jealous. I don't think I have anything quite that exciting from my childhood to share.
Well, I don't know. Go poking around the bushes in a public park. You never know what you're going to find.
Oh, for Elisa Eliot, I'm Zevon Odelberg, and this has been Kinda Murdery.
Kinda Murdery, The Emerald Triangle, is created, researched, edited, produced, and hosted by Zevon Odelberg, with opening theme by Niall Madden and art by the Djinn of Leng. Available now on all podcasting platforms. If you like the show, please subscribe, review, and tell your friends. You can find us on social media at Kinda Murdery or email at kindamurdery@gmail.com.